performing The Vagabond from Rachel Vaughan Williams' Songs of Travel, accompanied by Dr. Melody. Give to me the life I love, let the labor by me. Give the jolly hand above, and the byway by me. There in the bush with stars to see, bread I dip in the river. There's the life for a man like me. There's the life forever. Let's deploy for soon or late, let what will be o'er me. Give the face of earth around and the road before me. Well, I seek not hope nor love, nor a friend to know me. All I seek and love, and the road below me. All heart and fall on me, where should I linger? Silencing the pearl tree, biting the low finger. Quiet is still the frosty field, warm the fireside air. Not to autumn will I yield, not to winter Let's the hope for soon or late, that's what will be o'er me. Give the face of earth around and the road before me. Well, I ask not hope nor love, nor a friend to know me. All I ask a hand above, and the road below me.
Thank you, Mr. Matthew Gardner, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking your time to join us this evening for our Music Plus event. I would like to take the time to actually invite our guest panelists today to have conversations about art, literature, and science for musicians and music lovers. We have Dr. Andy Clay, who is our current interim chair and also professor of philosophy at UAH. Mr. Matthew Gardner, who just performed for you, is our proud UAH alum from the music department and currently serves as a choir director at Austin High School. Ms. Dory Nutt, also our wonderful former colleague, who is now the wonderful host that you hear at WLRH every morning from 9 to 12 p.m. And then Dr. Elena Frost, chair and professor in English. Jose Betancourt is a wonderful art photography professor. Myself is going to monitor here and to make sure your pizza is ready when we finish. Mr. Jeremy Siskin, our absolutely stunning guest pianist who gave a absolutely amazing jazz recital. If you missed it, it is on our UAH Department of Music YouTube channel. Check it out. It will just give you breathless time to enjoy the wonderful hour of jazz music. And lastly, Dr. Greg Marsh, who is currently the faculty chair at Hudson Alpha and also professor of genetics at Stanford, who's going to help moderate the event. So please join me in welcoming all the guest speakers for today.
That would be better. Yeah. So just me, thank you. so everyone can see this is going to be very informal. Yeah, I hope really participatory and engaging. And yeah, I want to start actually by thanking Melody for the opportunity to do this. It's a lot of fun. It's been great for me to really get to know the UAH music community and meet a lot of friends and colleagues. And the idea here is that Melody said, I want to do something different than what we've done in the past for the Keyboard Festival. And Melody said her passion was actually interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary fertilization of musical artistry, musical ideas. And so that was really what I think prompted Melody to say, well, let's see if we can find individuals in the UAH and surrounding community who will bring a mix of these of backgrounds and experiences that can be shared with each other and you. And so let's, can you just show? Yeah, okay, so we thought about this a little bit, and the idea is that we have, like, in thinking about how the different disciplines that can influence our lives as not only musicians who perform music, but also musicians who listen to music, who educate people about music, or learn about music. How those experiences can influence several different aspects of our musical lives. So one aspect is community, right? So how do our experiences affect our ability and interest and success in finding a community? So that's one area we want to explore. A second area, which is kind of an obvious one, is, I guess two of us are professional musicians, but maybe the rest aren't. We pursue music as an avocation, and so thinking about the balance between those. And then ways in which a discipline other than music has maybe, hopefully, been synergistic in affecting our enjoyment of music. So those are the three areas that we want to explore as a group. And so the plan is for each of the panelists to spend a few minutes talking about their background and talking and picking one of those themes to explore, and then to have some audience participation, to have questions and discussion with all of you, and then to react to each of those ideas from the different panelists. Jeremy Siskind has agreed to be at the center of that and get his response. And so let me start then by introducing Jeremy, who's going to play something for us. And I think many of you were fortunate enough to hear Jeremy last night and Melody's wonderful introduction. But I wanted to say just one or two additional words about Jeremy that I think are relevant to this idea of interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary studies. And that came out actually today. Melody and I had lunch with Jeremy, and one of the comments he said was that, when I talk to my students, I talk to them, he uses the phrase mastery plus. You need to master your instrument and your discipline, but to be successful, you need to pick something else as well. And I think Jeremy has probably picked more than one thing. He is not only a virtuoso as a performer and a composer, but also as an educator and an entrepreneur. And he's going to talk a little bit more about that on Thursday morning. But There was one when I was, learning a little bit more about Jeremy's background. There was something that I learned that really struck me, and I think, really had influenced his career. So Jeremy went to Eastman School of Music, but then after Eastman, he moved to New York, and then there were, I think, really two experiences he had that I think really may have influenced his artistry. He can respond, and those were the first pursuing, finding a mentor in Fred Hirsch, Fred Hirsch, a remarkable individual, amazing artist in and of himself. And then the second is pursuing another degree. So Jeremy got a master's degree in English and comparative literature, and I like to think that those experiences influenced Jeremy's artistry. At least I hear that in Jeremy's artistry today, both those experiences. So without further ado, we have no idea what Jeremy's going to play. He's going to tell us.
I'm not going to tell you.
Thank you. I just want to do a plug for Mr. Jeremy Siskin here. He is also a very well-known author, and if you're very interested to learn jazz, you can even actually find his instructional books and his latest project. I thought it would be good to bring it up because some panelists may not know. It's the Housewarming Project, where he performed over 26 states. So if you want to find out more. And people's homes. But we are in the South, so people are very welcoming here. So, if you're interested, find out more on his website, and also we'll talk more about it on Thursday at 9:40 a.m. So, thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, why don't we have our panelists on stage? Great. Okay, and let's see. We're going to start with Andy Kling. And my job is to try and keep things along so we can get to the pizza by 6:30, 6:40, 6:45 or so. So I'll try and say as little as possible. Okay.
Okay. My name's Andy Kling. I am the. Is that me?
Somebody's phone.
I'm the interim chair of the Department of Music, but I am not a musician. I'm a philosopher. The bullet point that caught my eye was the balance and trade-offs, right? And so what I was thinking is, and I know Melody was talking to me about wanting to think about how you balance different kinds of careers or avocations. And so that kind of struck me as interesting because I want to ask a philosophical question, obviously, about why is anything at all worth doing, right? Like what, if at all, makes life worthwhile, and how might you use an answer to that question to inform your answer to this more specific question? And one of the helpful, but it's not too complicated, distinctions that philosophers are want to make is a distinction between two kinds of goods, right? So some things are good because they produce or bring about something else that's worthwhile, like push-ups, right? For most of us, push-ups, we think of push-ups as good because they produce or bring about upper body strength or physical health, or a COVID shot. A COVID shot good? Sure it is, you should get one, but what makes it good? Well, it's good because it's a means to health or welfare or well-being. But think about what the world would be like if that were the only kind of good, right? The only kind of good is a good that brings about something else that's good. Well, that looks like a recipe for futility, right? Or this is good because that's good. That's good because this other thing's good. Or it's good as a means to this good. This is good as a means to this good. That looks like the rat race, right? So it looks like if life is going to be meaningful at all, some things have to be intrinsically good, right? That is good for their good all by themselves, independently of what their consequences are, or what they might produce or bring about. And it seems to me that things like reflection for its own sake, human understanding, love, and music are good in that way, right? So if you're going to have a worthwhile life, you have to sort of pick the things that you think are good for their own sake and do the other things in order to do those things. That's what I've got.
Jeremy, you want to
jump in there?
Oh, you've got react to that.
It might be this mic. Well, that's it. So, it's my job to react. And I love that. And it's also interesting as somebody who teaches music, because we do have this conflict as professional music educators that on one hand, we need to help people find a job, ideally, especially if they're going to be majors in the field. And on the other hand, we also have to honor that fact that it's good for its own sake, and that we want people to create art, to create things that feed themselves, that feed their own soul. And one of the things that I'm reflecting on, and I don't know if this makes any sense to pivot back to you, is, how that balance of being passionate about something and pursuing it for its own sake can coexist with the pure expression. Does that make any sense? Do you have any advice for me?
See, this is interesting because I'm used to the way a philosopher would react to what I would say. Right? A philosopher would react by saying something like, Kling made at least the following two assumptions. Right. One, that life is meaningful in the first place. What reason does he have to believe that? And the other was that they couldn't just be goods that are means to other goods. So, in any case, do I have any advice?
Well,
music is good for its own sake, and so it's worthwhile that you do it. And don't take any crap from people who ask you, why are you doing that? I'm doing it for its own sake, not to do something else.
Let me ask you a related question. Do you find that these categories are completely separate? Or are there some things in the middle that are somewhat good for their own sakes?
Plato says that the highest good is that which is good in itself and good for as a means to other goods.
So maybe I'm doing the right thing teaching music.
That's why I thought, no, being a philosopher was not as good. It was good in itself, but also.
Let me ask you a quick philosophy question. This is great. I've always wanted to have a philosopher at my beck and call. And I guess my question maybe is related because it's about giving. And I feel like there's this interesting relationship between music and giving that I feel like a professional musician or a performing musician should be this inherent giver, that we're giving this beautiful gift. But on the other hand, we're also, hoping for people to listen to us and to get something back from us. And there's this kind of cycle. It could be a good cycle, it could be a bad cycle, it could be a destructive cycle of hoping to get something and, get adulation in return for the giving or anything like that. Is there pure giving? Is that something that philosophers talk about?
Maybe. It's interesting. What I thought of when you said that is, I haven't been anything close to a musician since I was in the high school band and orchestra many years ago. But I'm an avid music fan. Right? What's the first thing you want to do when you hear a piece of music that you really like? What's the first thing you want to do? Share it with somebody, right? Yeah, listen to this, right? Listen to this. So I assume it's the same kind of thing with the performer, right? You don't want to just sit there in your studio playing to yourself. Shit.
Yeah, and it's such a conflict because on one hand you want to be this giver, on the other hand you want to say, hey, look at me, look at what I can do, check out this great piece that I wrote, and it's a tough balance to strike.
But it's worthwhile listening to it. Why is it worthwhile? It's worthwhile in itself. It's not worthwhile. It may have certain benefits, right? So think about benefits. Here's a good question. You'll know what the answer is, given that I've set it up this way. But what academic major is the most is the best for getting into law school measured in terms of the percentage of successful applicants to total applicants? What major is the best for getting to law school?
God, I hope it's music.
See, in this context, you can see what was going to be, because usually when I tell that, people say, "Oh, philosophy, right?" And it's music. But if you told people, "Look, the value of music is it helps you get into law school," that doesn't sound very good.
Andy, thank you.
That's not the value of music. That might be a value.
Thanks, Andy. Matthew.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit from two of our kind of main ideas, finding community and finding synergy. So I think I want to spend a little bit of chunk of my time talking about my non-traditional route to music. So when you were younger and that question you get asked all the time, like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was obviously music, right? No, computer science. So I spent my first 2 years here at UH as a computer science major. And it took me 2 years to realize that I hated it. So most of my life, music was a part of my life, like in church, and just various aspects. I came to college knowing that I guess I could go to the choir audition because I kind of like singing, so why not? So I did that. what I found in choir not only was just an outlet to just express, but that's where I actually found my community. And so that pull of community kind of took me away from of course, the profitability of a engineering and science career, right? As we probably can recognize, right? So I had that conflict pretty early versus passion versus, profitability, that kind of thing. But once I made that choice, around my second-ish year of college, that's where I stuck with it. So now it wasn't all rainbows and sunshines because I was a very raw pet project. Never had I ever had a voice lesson, never had I had a theory lesson. My professors in the audience can attest that that none of those things happened. But I think this is where the synergy comes in. I think that the STEM part of my brain assisted me into getting to where I am now. Because I was an undergrad in 2011, and here we are in 2023. And so I think the way that I approached things, I always approached them from a very specific and technical mindset. So we love metaphors in the vocal world. Like sing through your unicorn horn. I was always like, my what? I didn't know, how high does my larynx need to be? At what angle do my feet need to be when I'm standing up performing on stage, right? I was very technical minded, and I think that's where I was able to progress and able to kind of work my way through from being a very raw pet project to a professional musician. So I found all of that through just deciding to come to a choir audition my first year of college.
Yeah, and if I can maybe bounce off of that a little bit. It was funny when the pandemic hit, that us pianists were so used to being alone that we were all thriving. But the choir people, it was like a funeral every day for the choir people. So yeah, I guess what's special about choir? Is there an inherent good in singing with other voices and blending and doing all of that?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. Just when you find that group synergy, most of the time it's not the voices that matter to me. I could sing with a full choir of professional voices, but if I don't like the person, I'm gonna have an awful time, right? But if it's more so the community, the emotional connection that I have with the people that I'm singing with, that's what does it for me, hands down, every time.
Yeah, and I've noticed that all my choir colleagues, they're always going on retreats. And to bond. And I've never been on a retreat in my life. Why do you need this? Just teach your classes. So I wonder if you could go a little bit more deep into this for us pianists who don't understand why liking somebody makes you feel connected. Why liking somebody and singing with them makes you feel connected, or just maybe a special experience.
Yeah, it's almost a thing that's hard to kind of put into words. I'm sure there's more specific science that's been done, but singing requires a lot of trust, especially ensemble singing. If I feel that I can trust the people that are around me to do their best, and that I know that I'm going to do my best, I feel that it makes an overall just more complete, of course, product, because that's what we're in it for, right? A complete product. But also the experience itself is what probably gives me more. It just makes me feel good. I guess that's what we're sitting with, right? Just the feel good, the high that I get from singing in a choir with people that I like, even varying degrees of that, with people that I like. Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of, and I'm about to take this way to left field, and I'm gonna bring it back, I promise, okay? I heard a podcast not too long ago with a sex researcher, and her sister was a psychologist, a group psychologist, and actually taught choirs. And they described the commonality of sex and choirs as being a kind of magic circle where play was allowed within the magic circle. And obviously, there's a lot of differences, and I'm sure there's nothing like that in your classroom. No. But it's always stuck with me that there's this kind of magic circle of some kind of a collective freedom and communal experience in those two settings.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing. My school rehearsals are some would say a hot mess, but others would say it's just an experience in making mistakes together, but being comfortable with that. Because do my kids sing things perfectly the first time? Absolutely not. But do they have a great time singing the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing? They certainly do. And I feel like it's that experience and that trust that we build up is what gets them comfortable with, one, making those mistakes so that I can hear them and fix them, but being able to recognize when they happen and look at how we can, as a group, like how their individual matters to the group whole. So it's just kind of an experiment between those kind of two things.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. Dory.
Am I next? Okay. Hi there, I'm Dory Nutt, and some of you might recognize my voice. Like they said, I'm on the public radio station here as a classical music host, but before that I spent years teaching the French horn, playing the French horn, thinking about the French horn a lot. And when I was a young teacher, and I had students, or just anybody who would listen, I would extol the merits of music education. You know, if you give your child music lessons, they'll make better grades in school. They'll learn life skills in choir or band. Maybe they'll get a college scholarship. You know, I wasn't really extolling the virtues of having a career in music, but I said, this is really gonna set your child on a good path. You need to have music lessons for these reasons. And I really, I believed all of this, and I do think it's true, but as a parent of young children at the time, if my kids had a standardized test or a big exam coming up, you better believe that we ate fish the night before. I had Mozart playing in the kitchen in the morning while, you know, and I never announced that's what I was doing, but I was very manipulative about this, I guess. I always thought, well, whatever I can do. I mean, it doesn't cost much, and you know, I insisted that they take violin lessons, piano lessons, and join the band later. And my husband would get mad at me if he would hear me out in public extolling the virtues of music education for everybody. He's like, why do you have to justify that? Don't we all just need a little beauty in our lives? And like you said, yes, we don't have to justify that. And I think it took me all these years to learn that. Now I'm a grandparent. I have a 4-year-old grandchild, and I enjoy just sharing music with him. Not because I hope he'll get a college scholarship or do better in school. I really don't care about any of that. I just love the delight on his face. Sometimes he shares music with me. Sometimes it's something I just played for him. But anyway, I think it might take a few years to come to that realization for some of us. I don't know. So I don't know how you react to that. Good luck, Jim.
Well, I'm curious, as a musician, you know, whether you wanted us, so you're saying you didn't want a competitive type of music education for your children and grandchildren, but were there certain skills that you wanted for them? For example, did you want them to be taught, you know, to emphasize the ear or sight reading, or, you know, what did you hope that they would take away from it?
Well, as a long-time high school band kid, college band kid, you know, playing in groups like that, playing in any kind of ensemble, you have to do your own part very well. You know, you need some kind of group coping skills like Matthew has. You know, you have to trust others around you, and I think that's something that you learn in music ensembles that maybe you get out of sports. I'm not sure, I've never played on a sports team, but I think that's important. And I have to say that a little of my mission was self-serving as a professional musician. I didn't know if my kids would go into music. I kind of hope not. I wanted them to have good jobs, but I wanted them to grow up and be a musical audience for things that were going on. And they have become that. They do attend musical events. They're big music fans, and so, yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, and maybe you already answered, but music appreciation is one huge, you know, goal of music lessons and music in schools as well, that we need to create sophisticated audiences. Do you think that you program your radio program with the sense of inviting people in? I know that you said that you recently, you know, opened your show with a version of a Bach piece?
A Beatles piece played in the style of Bach.
Oh, the other
that was
way.
this morning, yes. He said, what's on your show? And I said, well, that's what we started with, a Beatles piece in the style of Bach. Now, most of it is classical music, but I am able to play Broadway jazz, whatever I'd like to play. I have control in programming. But it's funny, like you said, we like to have somebody listen to us, and I don't know if anybody's listening to the show. Sometimes people comment on it. But just this week, I have a new feature because I just couldn't stand it any longer. It's called Dory's Listening Party, because what's better than listening to music with your friends? I'm inviting somebody into the studio to bring their music and talk about why they like it. Not to educate us about it or anything. Maybe you heard this when you were a kid and you've loved it ever since or whatever. And my very first guest is Dr. Carolyn Sanders, the trumpet professor here in this department, because she's a good friend of mine and I know she's articulate and we kind of have similar musical tastes. So I don't think it'll be hard for me to have a good time, and I hope listeners will have a good time as well. And I see a lot of you that I see at concerts everywhere, and I'll probably be calling you soon to come be on this feature. Okay.
Yeah, that brings up a couple of things for me. One of which is I have friends who, instead of having a book club, have a record of the month club.
That's good.
And I love that, because I guess the second thing is, my understanding, this is a little bit before my time, is that there really used to be a lot of communal music listening, right? That you could only get one copy of that record, or you could even maybe only get one copy of that tape or CD in the day, and so you went over to people's houses, you had it on the stereo. And that's really something that we've lost.
Yeah.
I think that it's so, access is wonderful, but there's a flip side to that, which means it's not as precious. And I wonder how you think of that and how you would guide your kids and grandkids towards finding the preciousness in the music that you love.
Sharing it with them, like being there with them, like, hey, let's listen to this. Sometimes we dance. Yeah, I just, like I say, I've done a 180. Now I'm just like, for the joy of this, let's just do it. And let's do it together, And I'll give you a chance to play yours, and then I'll play mine. We'll take turns. So it's fine.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dory. That's great. Let's see, I think Alana.
Thank you. Melody called me to ask me to suggest someone for this panel, and I said, well, it shouldn't be me because I have a very complicated relationship with jazz. My name is Alana Frost, and the last time I listened to jazz was 1999. I don't listen to jazz. I didn't know how to contribute, but the interdisciplinary part of the conversation made me think about some work I've done in terms of sociolinguistics, which is more my area of English than literature. And the term translanguaging comes from linguistics and education, and it describes communication between bi and multilingual speakers. It's a theory, so bi and multilingual speakers who maybe don't speak the other's language are very adept at using all kinds of transitional gestures and words and sounds to communicate. So it's a theory that resists the notion that language can be perfected or regulated, that it needs perfecting or regulating. Sorry, I've got my own notes that are a hot mess. That it needs perfecting or regulating, and also in that regulation there's loss. If we try to teach students or children to speak the Queen's English, we've lost something. They notice that, especially the ways that every speaker uses communicative and semiotic resources to communicate words and sounds and gestures in really rich and meaningful ways. So researchers are challenging the sort of siloed and rule-bound nature of teaching language. Like, if you're teaching French, don't let students speak any other language. When you're teaching English, make sure they're only speaking English. This is all being challenged by this sort of theory. So in my own work, I encourage teachers to really listen in writing. I teach writing mostly, to really listen and celebrate what their students are writing rather than maybe regulating all the time. I want to read you this. I just read this in a paper today. And I asked the students to write about something familiar. So parent, sister, brother, just a paragraph. And I got one of these phrases that I'm enamored of. This student is speaking of his mother. She made udon that tasted love and was unforgivable. If you've ever had an unforgivable udon noodle, you'll know what this student is talking about. He's not forgiving the noodles that his mother made. My point here is, I'm not familiar with the discourse of this whole community. I'm not a listener of jazz. I almost cried listening to you play, so I appreciate very much. But I don't feel I have the language to trans-language with you. But I would ask, tell me what you listen for in jazz's origin and history and its meaning in your life. So what you hear and what you're listening for.
Oh, wow, you threw the question back at me. I love it. Well, no, I think it's interesting because I was going to kind of react that I think really practiced jazz musicians are going to hear things on a different level and with different depth. Kind of like, you know, if you're reading a great piece of literature and you're a literature scholar, you might see all of the intertextual references. You might know what that word meant in 1890 versus what it means today. And it's very much the same for a jazz musician. You know, the more that you know, it gets a little bit harder to listen just for the absolute pleasure of the sound. Occasionally, that's possible when a musician is so stunning that it just sweeps you away. But a lot of times, I'm listening for the references. I'm listening for the tricks of the trade that they might use that I will recognize. I'm listening for which other musicians they might be imitating stylistically. I'm listening for how they shape an improvisation or a piece or a set and what decisions they're making. And of course, as a teacher, I'm used to, I don't like to use the word criticizing, but I'm used to listening very critically. So I might listen and think, oh, that shortcoming, that, you know, that keeps kind of coming up. I wonder if they're aware of that. And so, you know, I'm also following along with what we call a form. Most any jazz piece has kind of the melody, and then that chord progression repeats again and again, and this provides the structure for the piece. And so I'm always really precisely tracking, where is this person in the form? And if they lose that form, I know immediately. And I might be tracking, oh, they chose that chord the first time, but they chose this second chord the next time. So it almost makes it a little bit less linear. I'm kind of always comparing to what came before and making predictions about where it's going to go based on my knowledge. So in that way, it's probably different than an amateur or a casual listener who's just hearing sound, enjoying a melody, feeling rhythm. You know, singing and dancing, I think, are kind of the most primal connection to music, and that's where people connect usually. Originally, that's where children tend to connect. But as we get more and more frames of reference, we start doing this comparison. Does that resonate with you?
It was wonderful. It was all for me. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm happy. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful answer.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I was going to ask you, especially, I'm about to go to Louisiana in a couple of days, and you know, certainly your little mini speech, your response to these prompts reminded me of the origins of jazz, and it seems to me that, you know, it could have only happened in a place like New Orleans, in a place like Louisiana, that was this linguistic and cultural melting pot. And I guess I'm curious how you feel about that. As well as, you know, what are some other places? Are there other art forms? I know that you're a linguistic expert, but are there other art forms that kind of developed? Is that common to develop out of this kind of melting pot of languages and cultures?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question.
That's your next paper topic.
That might be a good segue, actually.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
I think, yeah, you have
Great.
examples.
Well, I have examples.
I know you do.
Can I stand up?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to turn my head every time I'm going to talk about something here. My name's Jose Betancourt. I teach photography and art in the art department. And my connection, I can tell you a little bit about my background when I first started. So I was, I started in 6th grade band, playing the saxophone. Ended up with, marching band all around. Ended up with a scholarship in college, full scholarship in music, and I was interested in jazz. I played in the jazz band and traveled. I was in the University of Central Florida Jazz Band. We went to Montreux and North Sea, which was amazing, and then it was over. Then I was done. And the reason why is because I took a photography class. I took a darkroom class. And I was always in love with photography. Always had, I don't know if it was, I think music was still above photography for a long time. And then all of a sudden photography just started taking over. And I think part of it had to do with the craft and, the whole, everything that encompassed, photography. But then as I started looking at exactly what was going on, the common factor was time. I thought, how am I seeing this as far as like a 60th of a second or a 1/25th of a second, right? Or a 60th, I don't know, maybe there's a tempo, right? So luckily, I've been very fortunate. I've found the right people at the right time. Roy DeCarava, if anyone is familiar with Roy, he was my photography professor at Hunter College in New York City. And here he is playing a saxophone. He was a frustrated musician. He was not really good at all. In fact, I knew it when he told me that he bought a C melody saxophone, which was, you know, a dinosaur, and you really can't, you can maybe play with a piano and that's it, right? So, so Roy was a big influence on the way that I started thinking about things. He was, in fact, there were times when we didn't talk about photography at all. We talked about music. So I'd have my 2 hours with him in graduate school, and he was talking about taking pictures of Coltrane or, Elvin Jones, and we talked about all these Billie Holiday, and of course I'm going to talk about that, right? I mean, why not? Who cares about photography, right? So anyway, eventually what ended up happening was that well, let's show the picture of Coltrane, because I think some of you may even recognize this. This is from the early 60s, so this is one of the photographs that he took. He would never take pictures with flash. It was all available light. It was all basically improvisational. Whatever happened, slow shutter speed, blur, emotion, action, everything was happening in that picture that was happening on stage. It was very, very improvisational. So then let's go to the next one. I was using a camera that took 72 pictures from a 36 exposure roll. And it gave me a strip, and those black marks are actually the in-between spaces between each frame. So I'm taking a picture, I'm advancing the film, I'm taking the second picture, and I'm actually rotating as I'm going. And if you know anything about in-camera editing, I can't predict the next one. I have to improvise. I have to take the chance on how the next one's going to line up. People ask me, did you use a tripod? No tripod. It was like this visual kind of, almost like a latent image is what we call it. Latent image that's not really there, but then the next one is the latent image. So then, you see the cubist effect too, because everything overlaps. It's got this, kind of like rhythm and maybe even like a vibration to it too. Next one is I took the frames out, the black lines out. And this was because Roy said, take them out. And I knew that it wasn't going to work. I was saying, Roy, I don't know if this is a good idea. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm not showing the entire strip anymore. The strip is now broken up. And the strip of the black lines was important to my rhythm. And it was happening in the camera, not manipulated by anything. It was my intuition from one to the other. This makes it look like it's 4 pictures on their own, not from the camera in order. So, what did I do? I decided that I was going to start messing with the lines. I put the lines back in, and now what happened to the lines? They disappear. So here's my sound reference here. This is the beat that has now been, you can think whatever you want. I mean, I don't have to give you the answer, but do you see how there's a black area? So could it be a rest? Could it be a whole note? Could it be a time when things are just held out? Could it be a low note because it's black? Maybe, possibly. So by hiding the black lines, maybe I had a better chance of, maybe changing his mind, that maybe the black lines were good. Right? And the next one is, I added more black lines. So now you have the beat, the beat, the beat, the beat, and then the syncopation. You have the beats in between. You have the idea that it emphasizes between the beats. And that won him over. I sold it. So that's what I loved, is that I could actually come up with this concept that came from music, and then all of a sudden, here's Roy DeCarava saying, you know what? I think you did okay. So anyway, that's my 5 minutes.
Jeremy, do you have?
Sorry, Jeremy.
No,
Was that too much?
I love it. I'm just not even sure where to go from there. So
So do you actually, I love this analogy between the beats and those lines. So do you actually think about music or listen to music as you photograph? Would that be distracting, inspiring?
Right. When I'm actually making the picture, I don't. But in the darkroom, I used to, and it has to be, if I do listen, it would have to be like LRH or somebody that's, it's calming. It has to be calming, maybe some jazz, But when I'm shooting, of course, it's just spontaneous when I'm there, what's happening, and yeah, that's mainly it.
Okay, I've got a really weird question for you.
I can handle
Okay, I'm going to tell a little story. I was walking around New York City with a really great jazz singer, and he was talking about jazz and talking about modern music, and he was saying, I love jazz, but to most people, the city doesn't feel like that anymore. Do you feel like there's, an inherent, like, with images or with a place, is there an inherent match that people can feel between time period, between mood, and music? I mean, obviously it's individual to some degree, but do you kind of hope that something like, do you feel like your photo would pair well with something and not other things? Does that question make sense?
So are you talking about like when you're seeing something, do you think musically or
Are there? I guess my question is: are there pairs that make sense and pairs that don't make sense?
Yeah, sure. I would say so. I mean, I think really my sense or my sensibility to the jazz part of it would be that things are spontaneous, just like improvisational, kind of whatever happens, happens. As far as the visual part of it, I mean, there could be, like you showed me that picture of the rust, it could be like more free jazz. If it's going to be rusty and drippy and whatever, I mean, it could be something like that. But for me, I think what I'm talking about when I'm saying that it's improvisational, I think it's me.
It's the process.
The process.
Yeah.
Rather than what's visually there. I think I react to it where it's like, I'm taking chances. Like we talked about taking chances. I'm trusting something, that idea that you're in the moment, taking chances, doing your thing, and whatever happens, happens, So that's for me, that's the way it works for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that work.
Thanks.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. That was great.
Thanks.
How are we doing on time?
I think it's time for you to speak.
So this one?
Okay. I was thinking about this a little bit, and I thought about this finding synergy in pursuit of music in another discipline, and actually I thought before I tell you about that, I wanted to say that when I read an article about Fred Hirsch, right? So I mentioned that, Fred Hirsch, Jeremy's mentor, and there was an article in 2018, and a quote from that was, Hirsch's sensitivity and intelligence are the defining elements of his personality and musical style. And I have to say that's something that I hear when I hear Jeremy play. Sensitivity and intelligence, and personality, and I'll come back to that article about Fred Hirsch in just a minute. But I wanted to start with that as background. So my background is my day job is I'm a geneticist. I study genes and DNA, and one of the things that I love about genetics is it's like math. There's an answer, and it is precise. There's a right answer and a wrong answer, and there's one way that things fit together. And when you figure something out, it's real. It's there forever. And that is the way that. Well, let me say it differently. I mean, that approach is something that, or that ethos is something that appeals to me about science. And then, but I also, I mean, I'm a musician. I love music. And so what I want to think about and ask about is the potential synergy or lack thereof between a discipline where there is an answer, there's one way to do it, and everything fits together, and where there's not. And I guess, and this is you know, in part a question for Jeremy, because I find that for me, you know, this sort of structured, organized, precise approach is something that I feel helps me technically. It helps me think about, you know, harmony and melody and providing, you know, this, it's structured, something that, you know, all the pieces are there. But of course, that's not enough, you know, I think for art. I mean, that's not art. And in this same article, this Fred Hirsch article, there was another quote that I read where they interviewed Jeremy, and this is the quote. It says, Siskin says that his first lesson with Hirsch in 2007 was a life-changing experience. He told me that I had a ton of skills, I was very talented, I had obviously done a lot of work, but that it was meaningless, that I wasn't saying anything personal. And so that's my question, Jeremy, is what, I mean, obviously structure is really important, but how do you, and when, you know, during development as a musician, how do you say something personal?
Well, let me give you the definitive answer. Pull up a chair. I'm just going to free associate because I don't really have an answer. I love to make this metaphor to language, and I'm sure that you know much more about language and learning than I do, but I always talk about with my students that, you know, it's cliche, music is like a language, and especially a certain style like Baroque or classical or jazz is a very particular dialect of this language. And so one of the things that I like to think about is that you have to be a fluent native speaker before you can really try to reinvent the language. You need to, you know, if I'm working on Spanish, which I am, I'm not probably going to jump into writing Spanish poetry just yet. I want to be a native Spanish speaker. I want to have a total mastery of that language. And, you know, of course I could dabble on the side if I really found a great rhyme between two words. But really, it's a matter of mastering that language and then playing with those elements about, you know, writing a poem where you're coining new words and putting things, you know, where you're calling udon, what was the word?
Unforgivable.
Unforgivable, right? If I did that in Spanish right now, my teacher should probably rightfully just mark it as a mistake. That's no way to describe udon. So, like, my thought about this approach is that, you know, you have to become a fluent speaker through imitation, through exercises, through practice, through repetition, through conversation, through learning set phrases, and then start to make art. And a few things, you know, are bouncing around my head that, you know, when it comes to making something personal. And the first is looking outside of just that discipline. If I have a narrow mind and I'm only thinking about the jazz tradition that came before, I don't really have the ability, the mindset to do anything other than imitate. But if I'm thinking about a poem that I just read, if I'm thinking about a love that I feel for a person in my life, or a loss that I've just gone through, or the beauty of nature, or a beautiful photograph that I just saw, then those are moments to me where I can go to the piano and using that fluent language that hopefully I'm speaking and have something pour out. And those are the beautiful moments. Those are the moments that I think we would all say are good for their own sake. One other thing that's floating around in my head, I don't know if anybody else is a Brené Brown fan, but what she talks about is vulnerability. And this idea that true greatness, personal greatness, true goals are overcoming our shame and being vulnerable with others. And to me, that's a huge part of what great art is about. And so one of the things that I love about pursuing music, and particularly for me, jazz, but it could be any art form, is that it's a personal journey. that the more that I'm in music, the more that I'm able to perform, the more that I interact with audiences, the more I'm able to give a little bit more of myself, take some more chances, show a little bit more of who I am, be more spontaneous. I played that song in a key that I never play it in today, and have that trust, that vulnerability, that it'll be okay. Or even if it's not exactly perfect, what actually matters is the expression of it, the fact that I'm here giving it as a gift to you, and all my years of practice and preparation as a gift to you. So those are some things that I've reflected on in terms of trying to, on this journey that I'm still very much on, of surpass just that imitation, learning how to speak the language and actually get to that higher goal of achieving something personal.
Thanks. What do you want to do? Do people have questions they want to pose to any of us or to Jeremy, or things they want to say?
My wife is going to kill me. So I have no musical qualities at all. I grew up with a grandmother who could play the piano like crazy, my mom, everybody. But my life, here at 71 now, I do a lot of reflection. And my life has been centered around world-class athletics and military special operations. And I want you to know without a doubt, music has been very much connected to those things in terms of setting the tone of continuity of effort, teamwork, discussion about what are we going to play before the game, having the band there, in rehearsals when we're getting ready to jump out of an airplane. It's a rhythmic thing, go, go, go. It's very rhythmic. So I want you to know this old guy here has been involved in music and appreciated from being a world-class, when I'm running hurdles, it's rhythmic. Right now, everybody's struggling to get music in their ears as we're practicing for triathlons in the pool. It's everywhere now. So everything, all I've done was world-class sports and military special operations, and music has been there for me, and I appreciate y'all. Oh, Keith Cromarty. I'm married to this lady. She works for Dr. Frederick, but Dr. Frederick didn't show.
Other comments, questions?
Here's one.
I don't think
Royce, go.
the interdisciplinary approach, the interdisciplinary aspects of mixing music with other things. In my own experience, I got a BM in music, and I got an MA and a master's and a DMA. So I'm applied type performing trained. But you look at a lot of the great performers in the world, they're not just music people. They're like Jeremy said, you've got a second degree in something else. And so I've always been a proponent for our department here to be a BA degree, to allow you to have a minor in some field other than music, thinking it really strengthens your sense of performing, your expression of the music, making sense out of it in a truly human way, as well as giving some conservatory type applied training in the studios to try to mix the two as best we could. Living in a university that is highly professional in the science and engineering, and trying to fit that concept of what music can do to contribute to your engineering degree, because you enjoyed playing in the high school band, you could continue to play in our fine wind ensemble or whatever, that sort of thing. But I wanted to speak to one of you who said about mixing the law degree with music. I had a small ensemble here one year with two of the women in it. It was about a 12-member group. And one went to Vanderbilt from a music degree to a law degree at Vanderbilt and became a clerk in a federal judging office right off the bat. The other one was went to Tuscaloosa for her law degree, was first in her class when she graduated. So I think that proves pretty much of the music law connection. Not for me, but for many. But I really like this talk about the interdisciplinary aspects of music in the arts, or music in every aspect. That's exciting to me, and I think something we should personify here in our department, this university.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to add a little thought, just because these are all new and old friends that I put together. I keep telling everybody, I'm like, I just want to have a party on stage, and here we are. I wanted to add that the gist of where we are right now, right here, Huntsville, is because the government decided to get Dr. von Braun to launch and be the pioneer of the aerospace development for the United States. And Dr. von Braun himself is an avid musician alongside all those other colleagues of his. So every week they would be doing string quartets. And in fact, in our library, we have Dr. von Braun's own piano compositions that I actually got to play under the Saturn V a couple years ago. So, the idea of music may not be profitable, I want to really take that and emphasize that is exactly why I am here, asking all of you to join me, who are friends of me, who are not necessarily in the music department. Most of you are not. But because I think when we look at music, and I explained some in the lunch, where my background is, music is not actually a poor choice of career. It is actually a backup plan, like an engineer here. And I think it takes generations of people and dialogues and exchange like we have right here, like a Schubertiad, except it's earlier in the evening and being spotlighted instead of at home, to just carry on conversations about the idea of the Renaissance man, right? Because if you look at Einstein, if you talk about, I didn't even know about a law school, I only know about a medical school. Like, yeah, if you want to get into medical school, getting your undergraduate in music is a kind of guarantee. They love taking music majors. So now we can advertise even better. If you want to talk about practicality of the profitability of having music training. But I think just kids go to make sure to take music to make sure the test scores go up. But then I was like, well, then why shouldn't they continue to take music, whether it's in choir or band or just piano lesson in college, so that they have a better resume to prepare themselves for life, regardless of what choice they make. And so we are actually in a very unique position that most institutions do not have. Like, everybody at UAH can take anything. Whether you're an engineering major, whether you're an arts major, whether you're English, it is such embracing community that while wind ensemble is consists of majority non-music majors. And so I just wanted to create this event. I asked Dr. Barsh, who I just met over the email because of Jeremy, for his love and training of music, that gave me an idea that instead of doing this annual piano competition, I said, I'm going to do something new. After COVID, I was stuck. I was like, I don't know what we're doing, keep doing just talent-based piano competition when majority of my students here are major and minoring something else, and we just want the stimulating thought process that embrace the origin of even this piano has fiber optics and internet based. It is a highly engineered piano that we have right behind you here. And it's just the gist of the Rocket City and the people that live here. So I just want to throw that out there to go talk about the profitability. And I think music lovers, whether it's a eclectic listener, or I cannot play jazz, so I'm so glad Jeremy and Greg and everybody here can appreciate and love jazz. I do not even have the language, but it doesn't matter. As I said, I kind of want to throw that back out here is, what does music mean to you? Like, this is only just start of the conversation and to hope to network with people, and I was so inspired by everybody's conversation that there's no script. Dr. Barsh was talking about math, like genetics is so precise and right answer. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for today's conversation, so I just want to thank everybody. But also Dr. Barsh, who just agreed without him approaching, was like, hey, I just want to help. I'm like, great. And I also want to speak to Dr. Frederick. So I'm sorry that he wasn't able to join us today. He had an emergency. But he actually was the reason that gave me confidence since I joined UAH, because he approached and said, hey, you guys are musicians. I was a musician too. I want to bring you over to the Propulsion Research Center where he is the director of, and just to network and play together and have barbecue. And so I want to thank Dr. Frederick and for being a pioneer on this campus at least 10 years ago to really start this kind of dialogues, and he even played in our graduation ceremony as a tuba student. So I'm going to pass to Dr. Bosch for pizza time.
Well, I don't know how to follow that up other than to, what's that?
Oh, no, keep going.
Yeah, other than to, thank you for the opportunity. Thank all the panelists for sharing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, and I sincerely want to thank every single panelist, and please join us for pizza. We have pizza backstage, and I also guarantee everybody will have a little raffle drawing. So, Dr. Bosch, would you like to pick one? Would you like to announce?
What is, so, I don't quite understand this because...
So in order to enter this drawing, they have to answer a question. So what is the answer and who is it by, submitted by?
Well, this is a little bit like Jeopardy, because the answer is Mary had a little lamb.
Oh!
And so, and I will say that, the winner is Matt Buckler.
Do we have a Matt Buckler here? Oh. Well, but that is the favorite piece of Mr. Matt Buckler, so we go to the next lucky winner.
Kaden Helbling.
Hi, Kaden. This is your tickets for our next Constellation performance in February. So this is for you. And what is the answer? We need to hear your answer of what is your favorite piece of song.
It was on the spot. I had said Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Which is
Look at us having all this nursery rhymes, right? And who is our next lucky drawer?
Taylor Honeycutt.
And what is the answer for Miss Taylor?
Aurora by Bjork.
Oh, we go to Iceland. Very fantastic.
Hi, Taylor.
We got more? Okay. Shannon Womack, who selected Moonlight Sonata.
Oh, very eclectic audience that we have here.
She can't get anything. Okay, here we go. We only got two. Okay, should I go? Okay. Joe Ng is the winner, and Joe's favorite piece is Prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier. I'm not sure which one, by Bach. And I saw Joe.
Yeah, I think Dr. must have left, so we'll make sure to let him know that he was a winner, but that means two more.
Okay, there you go.
We have Vincent Westmeyer, favorite song, Run the World by Rare Americans.
Ooh, Vincent, where did he go? Once again, Vincent was a great attendee. Well, do we have one more?
We have some.
I want to make sure.
Right. Fearless by Beethoven from Gabrielle Cromarty. Sorry, I butchered that.
Thank you. All right, we got one last one.
One more.
All right.
You're doing a good job.
Try Again Tomorrow by Lena Flores. B. Westmeyer.
Okay, so the
Everybody
West
gets
Bioscience is here. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And it is preset time, and we can have more dialogues and exchanges. So, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, each of you, for spending your precious time and sharing your thoughts, very provoking thoughts. So, I hope more collaborations can come from this conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Melody.
This is great. All right. Was that the right note?
What time did we end at? How do we do?
competition. He must be in the room.